If you're like me and you like to cook with ground turkey, but you don't like for it to be tasteless and dried out, which is very easy to have, which happens very easily with ground turkey, then this is your video. In this guide, I'm going to give you 9 tips so that your ground turkey going forward, if it isn't right now, it will be flavorful and juicy. And you'll be glad actually that you cooked it and won't feel like you kind of wasted your efforts. Welcome to A Great Cooker. I'm Sophronia. I'm so glad to have you here. Let's go ahead and get started. Tip number 1 is to season generously. And I mean that. Season generously. I don't know about you, but I've looked up lots of ground turkey recipes over the years. And they're usually like use a half a teaspoon of this seasoning, uh, maybe a teaspoon of that seasoning. I am telling you, those small measurements, they're not going to cut it with ground turkey. It's just too bland. It doesn't have its own taste, in my opinion. It's going to take on the taste of whatever spices that you add to it. So be extremely generous with your spices. I'll tell you something that I do. If a recipe says to use 1 teaspoon, like for example, say it says use 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, I immediately just convert that teaspoon to a tablespoon. I know it's a big leap between a teaspoon and a tablespoon, but for ground turkey, that makes a huge difference. I have a recipe on A Great Cooker that shows you how to cook some turkey burgers. And they are the most delicious, flavorful, juicy burgers. They are so good. I'm going to try to remember to link to that recipe below. But in that recipe, I show, you'll see me using tablespoons or at the least maybe half tablespoons. And that is why that recipe turns out so good. And when you season your turkey generously, make sure that you get that seasoning all throughout the ground meat. You're going to have to get your clean hands in there and mix all that meat around and get all the seasoning all throughout the meat. Now, it's a little bit tricky because you don't want to overhandle your meat. It can make it tough, but you've got to do it enough to where you can see those spices all throughout the meat. And that's how it's going to turn out so flavorful. I want to give a caveat before I give tip number 2. As of January, as of this year, my channel is keto. I make keto recipes. Now, if you see any of my older videos, it is very possible that they are not keto. But right now, for myself, I eat everything keto. And you might be used to that in my recipes. So I just want you to know that tip number 2, I don't think is keto friendly, but it's the truth. So I'm just going to share it with you. And that is a way to make your ground turkeys so delicious is to add a packet of soup mix. I don't own any to show you, but I will put up a picture in case you are unsure of what I'm talking about. The reason why I know that this is the truth is because when I was growing up, there was a point where my mom started cooking healthier for us. And this was back before this was the norm. She started making us salads and she switched from white bread to wheat bread. And she switched from ground beef to ground turkey. And that is how I first discovered how bland ground turkey is. But my mom, I don't know if she figured it out herself or if she found a recipe, but she started putting 1 packet of Lipton onion soup mix in 1 pound of ground turkey, mixing that all together with an egg, and then making turkey burgers. Oh my goodness. I mean, that was it. That packet has all the seasonings that you need. Now, I do know that some of the seasonings that are in there are not keto friendly, but if that's not your concern and you just want delicious burgers and you just want them as quickly as possible, give that soup mix packet a try. And not only did she do that for the burgers, she also used that packet plus some other seasonings, some Italian seasonings in the ground turkey that she used to make spaghetti. Mom. Thank you for that. I'm telling you, my mom every Thursday, she used to be off from work and she would cook this turkey spaghetti. And I would almost run when I would get off the bus so that I could get home and have some of that turkey spaghetti. It was that good. Number three is to incorporate some flavorful liquids. And I'm going to mention some liquids that you might not necessarily think about when you think about burgers. The first one is lemon juice. If you have a fresh lemon, then you can take just half of it and squeeze it into your ground turkey mixture. And this really brightens up the taste of your meat. So give it a try. I know it seems kind of odd, but very good. Also, um, you can use some coconut liquid aminos or soy sauce or Worcestershire sauce. I know Worcestershire sauce we do sometimes associate with burgers, but you can put like up to a tablespoon of one of these, and that also will help kick up the flavor of your burgers. Now, I'm talking about adding these liquids in conjunction with the seasoning. Like, don't just do the liquids. They will not be enough to flavor or to season your meat properly. And I said a tablespoon, but I mean, you could use up to 2 tablespoons. It just depends on your taste. I wouldn't use more than 1 tablespoon for the lemon juice, but on the other ones, you could do up to 2 tablespoons, depending on how you like your burgers. I was just looking at my list. Number six is a really good one. Um, I I think this one is slept on a lot, so we'll get to that in a minute. But what number are we actually on? Hold on. Number four is that you can add some chicken broth to your ground turkey as you're cooking it. Now, I don't mean adding it to burgers. I've never tried adding chicken broth to patties or, I think that would be too runny, too messy. But when you're cooking ground turkey, like maybe for spaghetti or for taco meat, then feel free to add maybe a quarter of a cup to 1 pound of ground turkey. Feel free to add that in there while the meat is cooking because honestly, ground turkey is dry. It's just naturally dry. It's just so lean. And adding that juice in, that broth, it definitely can make a difference in trying to put some moisture into that meat. Number five, this can both make your turkey flavorful and juicy. I know most of these other tips kind of do one or the other, but this one can do both. And that is when you add ingredients into your mixture that are have a lot of water in them. For example, onion. When you see my recipes for ground turkey, I have a meatball recipe as well that I'll try to link to. You will always see that I mince onion and I put that in my mixture. Now, I would like to give you a measurement as to how much is enough, but I love onion and I always overdo it. But I feel like even just like a quarter cup of onion to 1 pound of ground turkey will help tremendously to keep it moist, because as the ground turkey is cooking, the moisture from the onion is being cooked out of the onion and into the turkey meat. And you could also do that. Say, for example, you were making a turkey meatloaf. You could shred some carrots and some zucchini, some onion, bell peppers. All of those have a high concentration of water. You could shred any of those or all of those, and you could add them into your meatloaf. And that's really going to help your meatloaf to stay moist, because meatloaves have to cook for a while before they're cooked all the way through. And having ground turkey cook for an extended period of time, that is extremely challenging to keep it juicy. So if you add those juice-filled vegetables in there, that's really going to go a long way. Number 6, this is something that I think makes a big difference. To me, most of the time when I'm making any type of patty from ground turkey or like any type of meatloaf, it needs a binder to stick together. You know, with ground beef, you can pretty much just form it a lot of times without a binder and cook it and it'll stay together, but that's not the case with ground turkey most of the time. So I always use an egg, but tip number 6 is to add a flavorful binder. So for example, you could just tear up some white bread really small and you can use that as a binder, but that's not very flavorful. What you can do instead is use something like Parmesan cheese. And that's actually exactly what I do use. I don't use bread. I don't, because it's not keto. And also, I don't use any type of flours, not even alternative flour. So, whereas a lot of recipes might tell you to add a quarter cup of almond flour or breadcrumbs, instead, I use Parmesan cheese as my binder. It's a flavorful binder and it is good. That has not failed me yet. In every recipe, that has worked. So keep that in mind if you're trying to infuse some extra flavor into your ground turkey. Tip number 7 is to cook with oil. Like I mentioned earlier, ground turkey is lean. I think most of what I get out of the store is like 93% lean. 7% fat is not very much at all. So I use oil. So, for example, when I cook my turkey burgers on my indoor grill, I will drizzle oil on both sides before I add it to the grill. And that's just to try to use that oil to try to help seal in some of the moisture. It definitely can help. And like I said, my go-to is olive oil, but you could use any oil. You could use butter even, or avocado oil, coconut oil, and oil's an oil, I guess, for this specific purpose. Okay, we're almost to number 9, which is, I think, maybe another tip that will help you that a lot of people don't realize or don't feel like they need to do. But before that, let's talk about number 8, and that is to avoid overcooking. That I think is just the easiest way to dry out any meat. Even even fatty meats, if you overcook them long enough, they will dry out. And so it's almost like ground turkey almost doesn't stand a chance if you let it get too much past 165 degrees. Even with all of the other efforts, the other tips that we talked about, it is really important to try not to let your food overcook. I have tried to get acquainted with the different small appliances that I use to cook my ground turkey and kind of check the temperature every few minutes. And so over time, I am figuring out how long it takes or how little time it takes to cook ground turkey to 165 degrees Celsius. Now, there's no reason to be concerned if your meat goes over that. It might get up to 175, 180, but if you're keeping your eye on it, it's probably only going to be that temperature for a few minutes before you realize that it's done. and you remove it from the heat. But yeah, that's a big one. If you let it cook too long, it's that little 7% of the fat that is there, it's going to be gone. It's going to cook out. Number 9, I am guilty of almost never doing, but I know it's the right thing to do. And that's why I'm sharing it with you. And that is to let the meat rest. I tend to be an impatient cook, or I tend to, in the past, I've needed to get the food on the table to hungry mouths immediately. And so this hasn't always been something that I've been able to do. But even if you can just give your turkey maybe just 5 minutes, I think conventional wisdom is 10 or 15. I'm going to look that up and I will put the correct amount of time on the screen for you. But even if you don't have that full amount of time, I've found just letting the ground turkey, the cooked turkey, rest for 5 to 7 minutes before I actually eat it has that's enough time for the juices to redistribute throughout the entire piece of meat. And that's why resting is recommended. I promise I fought this for the longest time and it just, I don't know why it sounded untrue to me, like I'm some type of food expert. But the experts are right. If you will let your food rest, your meats rest especially, and let those juices redistribute and then bite into it, you will notice that they are so much juicier. That's what I do in my kitchen to make my turkey juicy and to make it delicious. And that was only 9 tips. So I feel like there's probably more out there that can be done that I'm not aware of at this time. So I love it. If you leave a comment below, if you have some type of tip or trick that you do, then please share it with me and with everyone else in the comments. And that way we'll have something else in our arsenal to help us combat dried out turkey. I will make sure that another video pops up on the screen. So please feel free to check that out and also subscribe if you like this type of content. I do a lot of cooking on here, easy recipes, keto recipes, small appliance cooking. And also, I give tips and tricks, especially to beginner cooks, because I remember being a beginner cook and it being a bit intimidating. So, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.